today we will be doing a winter trees art project. For this project, I will be using a variety of materials. I have some tissue paper that I will be using. I also will be using some construction paper. I've got dark blue, light blue, and white. And I will be using a 9x12 pieces of paper, but you can use the larger size as well for a larger impact with this project. I also have a piece of music. We have some old hymnals that we are getting rid of, so I will be ripping out a variety of sheets of music to use, but you could also use book pages as well. I'm going to use Posca pens. These are paint markers, acrylic paint markers, but Sharpies also work. I have a cup of water, a paintbrush, and then the tissue paper that I'm using needs to be tissue paper that will bleed. So you may want to check first to make sure that your bleeding or your tissue paper is bleeding tissue paper. That's what will work the best for this project. And I'm actually going to start with my book pages or my music pages and my tissue paper and my plain water. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take strips or chunks of tissue paper and lay them out over my music or book pages, and then I'm going to paint with water over the top, and that takes the color from the tissue paper and lets it bleed onto whatever is underneath the tissue. So the green from my tissue paper will bleed onto my hymn pages to create some color on those. And the nice thing about using the tissue paper is that when you paint on it with just the plain water, sometimes there's areas that don't quite get the color, and so that'll be great for what we are going to use it for this project. And I'll show you once I've demonstrated this page kind of how it looks. So I will put this aside to dry. Usually I do about 5 of these at once, so I recommend doing like 4 to 5 pieces. Here you can see what they look like after they've dried. Notice I've used a variety of colors of tissue paper too, and you can see these white pieces or white areas that didn't quite get the paint, and those are actually great for making these trees look kind of like snowy trees. So I really like that effect. So I'm going to be using these 4 papers because my size of my project is only 9x12. 4 should be plenty for what I need. If you are doing the larger size, the 12x18 construction paper, you may want to use like 5 pieces of music. Now, I need to make some triangles out of my music. So if it helps, you can use a pencil and you can trace or draw a triangle right on the music to then cut out with some scissors. I like to have 3 different sizes of triangle. I like to have a large one, a medium one, and a small one. So I am drawing the 3 different sizes on my one sheet here. They work just fine. And then I'm going to go ahead and cut them out. And it's a good idea to have a couple sets of these. So a couple very large ones that almost take up the entire hymn page here. And then with the remaining paper, I make my middle and my small. And I'm not using any upside down triangles because there are words on this paper. I don't want any of the words to be upside down. So I am making sure that my triangles here on my hymns are all right side up. And these will turn into my trees. And the reason I want 3 different sizes is so that we have some that are close up, some that are about a medium distance away, and then also some that are farther away. So the far away ones would be very little, and then the medium ones would be medium size, and the close ones would be large. So I am trying to have all 3 of those sizes, and I will go ahead and cut them out from all of my different painted pages here. Here you can see the little collection that I have. So I've got a couple large ones, a couple medium-sized ones, and a couple small-size trees. Next, I have some glue that I'm got ready to use, and I'm going to start with my dark blue background. This is going to be the background of my paper. Next, I want to make a blue snow hill. So I'm going to rip close to the top of my blue paper because I want this hill to be larger, and I'm going to go all the way across my page and then lay it down on my paper to see how that looks. So that's going to be my distant hill, and it's a little bit more blue because it's supposed to be farther back. My close-up hill is going to be white, and it's going to be shorter, so I don't need quite as much of the paper. So I'm going to go ahead and rip a shorter section of my white paper, and then I'm going to lay that out like so over my light blue piece. So I'm liking how these are looking, and I'm going to go ahead and glue them down to my background. Now, if you decide you need a little bit more shape to your hills, you can always rip just little pieces to give them a little bit more texture, a little bit more shape so they're not so flat. But it's really up to you as to what you want your hills to look like. All right, I'm liking this much better, so I'm going to go ahead and turn it around. And I'm using liquid glue. You could also use stick glue for this project. And when I use liquid glue, I really only use a small amount. So I'm just going to do a real thin line around the outside edge of this part of my project. And then I'm going to turn it over and glue it down. I don't need tons of glue. This thin line will be just enough to keep my nice light blue hill on my paper. Sometimes I like to slide it around a little bit, make sure it gets a nice good seal, and then I will do the same to my white piece of paper as well. I decided I actually like it going the other way like this, so it's opposite dips of the blue hill. So I'm going to turn it around and add some glue in an outline just like I did for my light blue area. And I am going to add my white snowy hill to the foreground of my project. So now I've got a foreground and a middle ground and a background to my landscape picture. Now my landscape is very bare right now. It could use some tree excitement, so I also will want to be putting some trees in my foreground, my middle ground, and my background. My foreground needs to have large trees that are close to the bottom. My midground needs to have middle-sized trees that are in the middle of the paper, either on the white hill or the blue hill. And then my background needs to have distant trees, the smallest ones that are closest to the top of my paper on that blue hill in the distance. So I'm going to play around right now with the placement of my trees to see where I want them to go. Know that if you do have small trees and you want some to overlap, the big ones need to be overlapping the small ones that are in the distance. So once I kind of figure out which trees I want where, I'm going to kind of lay them out, and then I'm going to start gluing from the back to the front. So I'll start with the smallest trees way up at the top, and then I'll add the biggest trees at the end. So I'm just kind of playing around with the placement. I do want some of my trees to overlap. You can cluster them in little groups. Usually trees like to be hanging out with friends, so you can do that. But it depends on the size of your paper. My paper is smaller, so I can't fit quite as many trees. If you have a larger paper, you could do more. But I'm thinking I am liking the placement here, so I'm going to go ahead and start gluing. Again, I'm starting with the trees in the back, so these are the smallest trees. They should be the highest up on my paper. And I'm doing these first because my larger trees will overlap my smaller trees. So I'm just going to throw my smaller trees on there first, and that way if I have other trees that overlap them, they will be over the top of my small distant trees in the background. All right, background trees are done. Now I'm going to work on my middle ground trees. These are the medium-sized ones. And I'm going to go ahead and put some glue on the back of those and place them in the medium or middle area of my picture here. Notice I kind of intermingled the different colors of trees too. It's kind of fun to have a variety of colors going on here. And then my foreground tree is in the front. So I wanted to overlap these two to make them create some distance as well. I'll do the same with these two, my middle ground tree first. And then I will put my large tree, my foreground tree, over the top of it, overlapping just a little bit so it gives the impression of depth in my picture. I'm going to go ahead and trim this one just a little bit. I don't want it to be quite as large. And I will put some glue on the back of this one and then add it to my paper as well. Now that I have all of my trees on my picture, I am ready to get out my Posca markers. And you could use the Posca pens or you could use Sharpie or other marker as well. I like these Posca pens. They're basically like acrylic paint inside of a pen. And I'm going to use these to add trunks to my trees. And it doesn't really matter what color you use. You could use a variety. I didn't want to go with the brown that maybe people would think to use. I thought it might be fun to do like a dark blue instead, kind of with my blue theme here. And I'm going ahead and adding a little trunk to my trees along with some branches on top of the paper. This kind of gives it a more organic look and a more natural look as well. Now, when I have done this project in the past, I have also had students who have decided to add things to their trees besides these branches. Some have opted to add some ornaments to the trees to give them decorations. Others have added lights. Some have added little stars on the tops of their trees. So there are other things that you could add to decorate your trees as well. But I am going to keep mine very natural today by just adding some nice little branches coming off of either side of the main trunk of my tree. I am using a dark blue Posca pen. You could also decide to use a different color depending on which tree you are doing. And then notice my trunks go down just a little bit past the bottom of my music paper to make them look like they go into the ground. So I'm just going from tree to tree, adding these little branches, going all the way up to give them that organic feel and make people very aware that yes, these are actually trees that are in my scene. So it's really a nice effect. It makes a nice wintry scene with the little white showing through on the music papers as kind of like a snow effect on the trees. Now the Posca markers I'm using are very thin. There are thicker ones. Because these are so thin, I am trying to hold it sideways to get thicker lines on my trees that are closer to the foreground. Trees that are larger would have a thicker trunk, so I'm trying to make these trees have thicker trunks, and the ones in the background have the thinner trunks and branches because they are farther away in the distance. Now that I have all of my trunks and branches, I'm going to go ahead and use my Posca marker to add some snow. Now, usually when you use a marker, a paint marker like this, it's nice to have a little sheet on the side of your paper so that if you are having a hard time getting the paint out, you can test it out on another sheet and not your actual art project. So I have this scrap paper that I used when ripping my snow, and I am using that to kind of test out my marker to make sure that enough paint is coming out. And then as you can see, I am using my paint to add snow to my trees, or to my sky. Now, if you don't have a white paint marker, you could also use tempera paint or acrylic paint. And a lot of times I like to dip the back of my paintbrush in the paint and use that to add little dots of snow all over my background. So that is definitely another option and can create just beautiful effect of a snowy winter day. So try it out, see what you think, and hopefully you will come up with a beautiful winter scene inspired by this music, or maybe pages from a book that is old and needs to be recycled. A lot of fun things you could do to repurpose or reuse some things like that. So I hope you enjoyed this project and that it was very successful for you. Thank you so much for watching and joining me on my YouTube channel, Ehlke Art. Please come back for more fun tutorials. We have a lot of different projects and paintings and drawings that you can try at home with us as well. All right, and if you are enjoying my channel, please subscribe down below. Thanks so much for watching and hope to see you again soon.